Welcome back, Carters. It's Ruby from Ruby Breaks Baseball. We are going to be opening Popeye. What was a lot of glare there? Trading cards, and these are all from not a well-known manufacturer or producer. These are card creations, and I have had a fairly long obsession or interest in Segar. If I can ever pronounce it right, is it LZ Chrysler Segar? Is that about right?
I think that's I've heard both ways. I usually do kind of a Chrysler kind of thing. Some people say that there's a Chrysler building with the same spelling,
Yeah.
not the car Chrysler, but no, I don't know that people who knew him personally are really still around to correct it. So I usually do LZ, maybe Chrysler, Segar
Right.
myself, and people know who you're talking about.
Yeah. EC Segar. Yeah. And then of course I'm talking to this gentleman here, Andrew Farago. Is that
Farago.
Farago?
Right,
Oh.
right the first time, yeah.
Oh man, and I even like watched like YouTube to make sure, and I was like, and then I think you had the last time you were at Comic-Con, I think I followed that guy's introduction. I
Yeah.
forget what you're talking about, but and then of course Jenna's like, well, just ask if, and then I'm like, no, I went to YouTube. I'm gonna nail it. Uh, but the reason okay, so Andrew, you're a husband, a father, an illustrator, writer. I say you're an educator and then a curator. Would these titles? You agree with these titles?
Yeah, I think those all fit.
Yeah, and of course, you have a pretty well-established bibliography, but you're also one of members of one of the great institutions of the Bay Area and San Francisco Bay Area, and you're over at the Cartoon Art Museum, correct?
Yes, yeah, for 20 years now. So I started, um, first visit to the Cartoon Art Museum was August of 2000, and I went there to ask about volunteering, and they haven't been able to get rid of me.
That's the one way to that's one way to do it. What I wanted to ask you, knowing just a little bit from your background, from being Facebook acquaintances, friends, yeah, that what if somebody said, Andrew, we need a new curator, and we want you to run the Bill Ireland Cartoon Library Museum at Ohio State University. What would you say to that?
I would. That's a good question. If I, just in case recruiters are watching, if there's a generous enough offer on the table, and if it's interesting enough, I can read and research comics just about anywhere. So if that's the Studio Ghibli Museum, if that's the Billy Ireland, if that's the Met, if if I still get to read my Superman comics and and watch Star Wars, then I'm happy.
Yeah, and they're really interesting to me. They have a massive when you call what do you call it in the museum business when you store the collection, right? You have a collection, and they mostly it's available for educational for like people writing books and whatnot. But I know like all the Wattersons there, and I believe the Smith. What's the Bones? What's his first name from Bone?
Jeff Smith, yeah.
Jeff Smith. I believe his works there. I did see that there was quite a bit of Seeger stuff there. So it's always been Ohio. Am I actually going to say that Columbus, Ohio has actually been on my list of places I want to go visit?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. They've got such a they've got the world's best comics archive. That's kind of all there is to it. They've got originals. They've got a great collector and historian named Bill Blackbeard. They've got his complete newspaper tear sheet archive, which was, if not complete, very near complete record of every major syndicated newspaper comic from the 1890s until at least the 1970s or so, when um, it, people were more concerned about keeping archives like that. So he a lot of great strips, including Popeye, including Looking Right Over Your Shoulder, Crazy Cat, Terry and the Pirates. A lot of these great classic strips. Blackbeard's one of the unsung heroes of comics, and um, you know um, archivism,
Yeah.
if that's the right term. A lot of the great classic comics that we've gotten to read, these complete collections of, it's because of dedicated people like him who went out and went to landfills, went to libraries as they were deaccessioning newspapers, went to newspapers as they were switching over to microfilm and microfiche. And, thanks to people like him, thanks to forward thinkers like Mort Walker, Milton Caniff, Will Eisner, people who thought comics are important. This is a legacy to celebrate. We need to keep our letters. We need to keep our original comics. We need to keep our printed editions. So thanks to people like them that we've been able to build on their work. It's really it's really wonderful to build on their traditions.
Yeah, and we owe them a debt of gratitude, and I know, in the last 10 years we've seen some really nice like newspaper side volumes come out where we're getting that full like experience, but it also recaptures, because let's say with Segar, and then he didn't have Popeye throughout Popeye's whole life. I mean, Segar's already gone. It's been in multiple hands. It's been in multiple formats. It's almost like there's almost a Popeye for different generations, a different version. And but but to have access to those early works, and to be able to see like why they were so important during the Depression, why they were so popular with immigrant peoples, it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting because when I read the Popeyes from those early days, I have to actively like kind of, I can read them just kind of blankly as pleasurable, but then sometimes I really want to think about the context of the time, and then I also want to read them and then see what people were thinking, and like look up and see what people were thinking about and how they were actually taken in at those times. And so I think it gives me a unique opportunity to explore in that way.
Yeah, Popeye's terrific. It's I will say that it's, for me personally, and I'm not the only historian who thinks this, but it's a top 5 newspaper strip. Just it's one of my favorites. The Segar run specifically, and it's such great cartooning. It holds up so well. Um, it's laugh out loud funny. Like Popeye. Something I've noted about Popeye is, if you just know the cartoons where he gets beat up, eats some spinach, and then beats the other guy up, that's still a great character. That's a very fun character. I grew up, in the early '80s, so I was, over the moon when the Robin Williams Popeye movie came out. I begged to see that in the theater, and I love that movie. I will. That might be a whole other episode defending that movie. um, so and I really, when I was younger, I didn't determine I didn't really distinguish between the Fleischer cartoons and then the later ones, and the crazy stuff like Olive Oil joining the army Saturday morning cartoon. Um, and I will just say as an aside, I did not even give Popeye and Son a shot when that came out in 1988, and every YouTube clip I've seen since then tells me I made the right decision. That would have just put me off that character entirely. But going back to Segar, he's really amazing. I would love to, whether I write it or someone else writes it, I would love to dig into a 500-page biography of him. But he grew up, he grew up a fan of cartooning and comics and also movies. That's why his strip that he ultimately broke through with was called Thimble Theater. He loved movies. He broke into the comic strip business by doing a comic about Charlie Chaplin. So an early, we'd probably call it a licensed comics, but he did the official Charlie Chaplin newspaper comic. And that was a really great way for him to get his feet wet, get a handle on that business. As a teenager, those hard scrabble early 1900s times, he actually got a job as a projectionist at a movie theater and was so proud of it that he had MPO tattooed on his arm, motion picture operator. So he, again, absolutely loved movies. That informed his approach to comics. And I'd say we probably would not know him today if he had just kind of done his Thimble Theater comic as it had gone the first 10 years of the strip. It was a very I liked it. Everything I've read from that those first years, it's really fun. It's a fun group of characters, and they have truly wacky madcap adventures, and it's a blast reading those. But if he had not, if his lead character Castor Oil had not needed a sailor to help him out on one of these adventures, we would we'd be just as likely to be talking about Segar today as we would about Sidney Smith or one of the other notable cartoonists of the early 1900s who didn't have a strip that we all still know and love.
Yeah, that Castor Oil, he's always up to something, isn't he?
And there's such an amazing cast of characters that Segar had. So Castor Oil, brother of Olive Oil. Castor always had a scheme going. He always had some get rich quick scheme going, whether it's buying seeds or selling books, like just some way that he could get rich and famous with minimal effort. And so he heard there was a hen that brought you good luck, a wiffle hen that would help him with his gambling, and so he needed to retrieve this hen. So he and Popeye was great right out of the gate. Like he went to hire a sailor, and Castor walks up this dock and he says, "Hey, you there, are you a sailor?" And Popeye in his full sailing gear outfit says, you think I'm a cowboy? And that's an all-time great introduction. And they went, and readers loved this guy, this salty, no nonsense sailor who was just like he's gruff, he was tough, but he had a heart of gold at the core of him. And readers really responded. Letters to the editor were mailed. People wanted to see more of this character, so he brought him back, and very quickly, just like Fonzie, just like Urkel, like very quickly he had to retool the whole strip around Popeye and his adventures, and that's um, we're so glad he did. And there's so many um, great strips, and again, it's beautiful cartooning. It's just wonderful, energetic illustrations, and it is seriously, it's a laugh out loud funny. So Popeye, um, again, I mentioned we know him for the spinach, if you and that kind of action if you've only watched the cartoons, but um, he had all kinds of crazy adventures. He became a cowboy. He became dictator of a foreign nation. Um, he did a lot of boxing matches and other questionable things. And one of the things that cracks me up about him is um, I always thought his first response to almost any problem was to dress in unconvincing drag and see if there's a way. And um, not and it was and he went like full in on this character whenever he did it, like whenever he had to Popeye's obviously not going to be the most attractive woman, but he would get into character as soon as he put on a dress, and uh, maybe he had to try to seducing someone, maybe he had to pretend to be a poor helpless old widow, um, but there's so much laugh out loud wacky slapstick and situations like that in the comics. And you had drama, you had action, you had adventure, and I think everybody should check out go to the Fantagraphics website and see what they've got in stock right now. Get one of their these amazing Jacob Covey is the designer of these, and I love the cutout window up top. I love the close up of the sea hag there, where you get to see the Ben-Day dots. So the Sundays are all full color. Check out. You mentioned comics printed full size. There's also a great line of books from Sunday Press. Peter Maresca has done these reprints where you get to see comics full size, and including some early Thimble Theater. The pre-Popeye Thimble Theater. So there's, I say it all the time, but we're in a golden age of comics reprints.
Oh, absolutely.
So when I was a kid, it was always, you could find Peanuts books, you could find Garfield books. In the 70s, it was pretty easy to find little paperback editions of contemporary comics, like maybe Heathcliff or Beetle Bailey. But now all the best, all the greatest, all-time classic comics you have access to. You have those on your bookshelves, and that's a great thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking of comics that I've had access to in the last 15 years. Pogo, beautiful books there. Crazy Cat, Harriman, and Harriman is we could do it near. I haven't found any cards to open yet, so but if I could find something for Harriman, we'll definitely do Harriman, because
Absolutely.
Very interesting person. I did want to say one thing when you touched on Popeye not being pretty. And I'm not saying this happened in comics at that time, but Segar really didn't do any idealizations on any of his characters, right?
There would occasionally be there'd occasionally be a younger woman who was meant to be more attractive. And this was always something. Olive Oil was always very defensive, and once she and Popeye became a semi-official couple, like, she was very jealous and protective. Popeye just sort of went whichever way the wind blew. And he was definitely a sucker for a pretty face. But I think of, you think of later cartoons like the Flintstones, animated cartoons, and you see Fred Flintstone and Wilma, and they don't even quite look like they're the same species. Like he's this potato with feet, and she's modeled pretty much like a human woman. Um, so there's a lot of range in Segar's characters, but they do all um, they do all seem to have a common biology to
Right.
them. But he explores the full range of um, hulking characters like Bluto, and older characters like Sea Hag and Pappy, who's he's a character I could talk about for hours. Pappy, Popeye's father. um, but yeah, it's such a I don't know that you know until Charles Schultz with Peanuts, I don't know that any um, cartoonist had um, such a killer lineup of characters. Like Wimpy is one of the all-time great comic strip characters. Popeye and the Sea Hag and Alice the Goon and Eugene the Jeep. These are all. That's why we drive Jeeps. Yeah, that's a term he came up with. The spinach industry owes him a huge debt, making that. Um, we all come around and enjoy spinach eventually.
Eventually.
But I think it's so many kids tried it years earlier than they would have because of Segar.
And so some really good stuff there, and that ties in with um he because he didn't just pop out the box with Popeye, because he had an established audience, because he had this cast of characters and this theater, if you will, that he can use these characters and make his movies or plays or however you want to see it, is that he had this fertile time to really work on the ensemble before he got his star.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I've read and looked at, you're obviously right that he wouldn't, if he didn't have Popeye, we probably wouldn't be having this Zoom call right now. But he was very well established and very well appreciated, and Thimble Theater was highly. I mean, obviously, if when Popeye showed up, he had audiences like, oh yeah, we like this, we want more of it. But he did have that opportunity to work without him and get everything together, so that Popeye did have a cast of players.
Yeah, so he had a few years again doing that Charlie Chaplin comic strip that got canceled, and he pitched, and fortunately editors responded to it, and he started up Thimble Theater, and he was doing that for he was not an overnight success. He was doing that for about 10 years, with enough success that he was making a living as a cartoonist, but not really. He wasn't necessarily on a lot of people's radar. But he introduced Popeye, 1929, and this really transformed the strip. It caught on, and within a few years, he was a superstar. So Popeye was actually, and this is another thing that changed the course of the strip. Popeye was actually more popular than Mickey Mouse in the 30s. So you had the amazing Fleischer Studios animated cartoons, and kids love those. If you watch early Mickey Mouse, Mickey's like a bit of a rougher character, but he very quickly settles into plucky good guy who comes out in the end. And the early Popeye cartoons, he's a roughneck. Like, so he's he'll walk down the street singing a song, and then he encounters something or someone, and then fights break out. And he'll beat up the police, he'll beat up women, he'll beat up children, he'll beat, like, maybe not women and children, but like it won't take much to set him off and trigger a big fight. Um, and they hit upon that formula very early where he would eat spinach and get that last boost of energy he needs at the end. Um, and those are fun cartoons. The voice acting, especially, I think Jack Mercer, and that really puts those over the top. But interestingly, I'll backtrack to Popeye's dad. Because Popeye was so popular, because he was more popular than Mickey Mouse, he was becoming a role model for kids. So Segar's syndicate really leaned on him to, like, you got to clean up Popeye's act. You got to make him, not so quick to temper. You've got to. I know you do. I know you use little scribbles, but you have to, like, not have him swearing, not have him drinking. So don't do all that stuff. Make him more of a role model. And what I love is he toned Popeye down just this little bit, but he introduced Popeye's father, Pappy, Poop Deck Pappy, who was basically Popeye with a beard.
Yeah.
And I think what he did, and this is I love this so much. This is he toned down Popeye just this bare minimum, just this little bit, and he made Pappy a million times worse than Popeye had been. So he had a character who looked like Popeye but with whiskers. Who he swore twice as much, he drank twice as much, he threw away his money on gambling and chased women and did. He was pretty reprehensible, and it was a way to have a character who looked, again, except for like the stubble drawn on him, looked just like Popeye. And I wish I could buy Segar a drink based on that. Just such an all-time great move from in response to what the syndicate's demands were.
Nice, a little clever, gave him what they want, but he still got what he wanted.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
nice job. Oh man, I'm sorry. I think I had something here. And so Popeye almost overshadows Seeger, or does, but he embraces it, unlike, say, the Sherlock Holmes character in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, right?
Yeah, I mean, he knew Popeye was a big deal, and he signed. And I don't know all the details of whether he signed the contract or it was probably back in the day before you really had an agent, so it's probably his syndicate acting on his behalf to get those animated movies going. Very incredibly popular character with merchandising. Again, very early on in the 30s. So you had books, you had licensed products of varying quality, probably tin toys and things. So it did, I'm sure it did transform Segar's life as far as bigger paychecks, running in more newspapers. I hope he got a decent cut from the animated cartoons. At the very least, that made him more marketable, and I'm sure got him into more newspapers, which would have affected how he got paid. But sadly, he only got to enjoy this runaway success for a fairly limited window of time. So he had about 10 years building up Thimble Theater, and then he introduced Popeye, which changed everything. And then he only had less than a decade before he got sick and then died from leukemia. Yeah. And so even the scholars I've spoken to have pointed out, like, even the last year or so of the strip, he was relying more and more on assistants to help him draw it and meet deadlines. So he probably had a really great 5-year run where he got to just enjoy the fame and fortune that went with it, but then his health declined um, pretty steadily during those last few years.
And when your health is in decline like that, and you realize your mortality, and he was fairly young, so it could be a situation there where you're very thankful for Popeye to carry on your legacy because you're not there to do it yourself.
Yeah, and it's I'm very grateful for that we still know him and celebrate him. His hometown of Chester, Illinois, has Popeye statues. They have a Segar statue. They have um, you know they've actually been making kind of a Popeye character trail in Chester, Illinois. So every year for about the past decade, they've unveiled a new statue featuring one of his characters. So it's always great. I always love when in a comic strip creator or cartoonist's hometown embraces them and celebrates them and builds kind of a cultural identity around that. And so that's great. So he was, um, he did have some, um, you know, great years, getting to enjoy it, and not everybody comes even close to getting that. Like have many years of um, getting fan letters, getting um, endorsement deals, getting bigger and bigger paychecks from his syndicate. So that's I'm very glad that he had that during his lifetime.
Yeah.
And of course the character has outlived him and uh, has become a major part of pop culture. So you can't eat spinach without thinking about Popeye. You can't hear Stars and Stripes Forever without pulling up your sleeves and winding up your arm uh, and thinking about the havoc that you can unleash on people. And the Popeye movie is 40 years old now, and it's again it's very divisive. People love it or hate it. Even Popeye comic strip fans um, love it or hate it. I fell in love with it as a kid, and it's still one of my favorites today. I got to um, the one time I met Jules Pfeiffer in person, I mentioned the Popeye
Yeah.
screenplay to him, and he kind of rolled his eyes, but I'm glad. It's he's a huge Segar fan, and I think um, he did all he could to pay tribute to him in his script, and I'm sure he would tell you there are always changes from what you sit down at when you're sitting down at your typewriter and what finally makes it on screen. But um, I'm glad I got to thank him for that.
Yeah.
There've been a lot of great people carrying on his legacy. So King Features is um, still carrying on. They did a wonderful year-long Popeye um, tribute when he reached his 90th anniversary in 2019. I'm happy to say that my wife and I got to draw a comic for that. So they had 52 Sunday comics released by current artists, just celebrating Popeye, having fun with Segar and his characters. And I'm glad he's still around. I'm hopeful. There have been several animated projects that have started and stopped over the years, so I'm hopeful that the right person at the right time will come along, and that we'll get those new generations involved.
It needs like a Lauren Faust from My Little Pony, somebody who understands the context of today without, and then understands what you can't bring over from the old Popeye, the scrappy, but some of what they've attempted to give us has missed the spirit of Popeye, because it's really, I know it's going to be a delicate balance, but you need someone like a Lauren Faust who can just really, who feels it, who played with it, who loved it, and then says, well, this is how you put it to this generation. And I really hope we find a person like her who can do that.
Yeah, there have been some big names that have come along that have come close, that they've done. You know, we've at least gotten to the test footage, proof of concept stage, but we haven't. Um, you know, nobody's gotten the green light to go do a full feature movie or something yet. But you know, I'd also rather um, seeing what happens with some of these classic characters. So there's some characters from um, animation from the past 60 years or so who um, you know, every few years get a kind of a lackluster relaunch, where I'd rather not have it at all than have something that looks like bargain basement CGI
Yeah.
that you're just putting out there to, you know, see if the market is really there for a um, you know, Tennessee Tuxedo in space relaunch or whatever. You know, I don't even know if that's a thing.
It's
But
possible,
you
yes.
know, I'd rather see it you know, done right than like just see something put out there so that they can um, make a few bucks on the direct to DVD market.
Yeah. Andrew, I want to say thank you. I don't want to hold you too much because you do have a family. It is a weekend, and I did want to mention that Paul C. Toomey had a book come out last year, Screwball, that has some good information on this and some other comics. And that I also wanted to mention that you do have a new book coming out. Is it next month?
Yes, yeah, oh yeah, just about a month from now.
Can you talk about that a little bit? There's a little
Sure.
plug here.
Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough to write several books for a publisher called Insight Editions, and they do really nice coffee table book uh, books about pop culture, and they have um, a lot of great licenses. They've got an incredible design team. So I'm always knocked out with how these books look when they uh, you know, they take my um, stacks and stacks of Word documents and then add the pictures and turn them into these really cool things. So next up is DC Collecting the Multiverse, the art of sideshow collectibles, and this is so it's a really nice high-end photography book. If you know sideshow collectibles, if you've been to one of the bigger comic conventions in the last decade or so, you've probably seen these very high-end, beautiful sculptures, statues, action figures. So they do really incredible work, and I got to talk to their graphic designers and sculptors and costume fabricators, and really get kind of an inside look at you know, the production process. So this is specifically focused on their DC Comics line of collectibles: so Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and the whole crew.
Right, and this will be a nice addition for a lot of people because a lot of us aren't going to be in that high-end collecting area. So like I'm doing with trading cards, you're almost in the book. You're getting this interaction, and you're going to be able to see, especially with the high quality photos. You're going to be able to see this and almost kind of experience it a little bit yourself, right?
Yeah. So it's you know, $75 hardcover with this really great full color photography. A typical collectible from them might be $200 and up. So this is this is a way to take some of that magic home and get a look at. Um, you know, we've got some behind the scenes looks. We've got some shots from studios, so we get to see sculptors and painters at work. We get a look at some of the graphic design and preliminary sketches that go into some of these projects. Um, so it's a really cool thing, and I think um, based on the number of people I always see over at Sideshow's booth at San Diego Comic-Con, I think there will be a um, very appreciative audience for this, that they'll get to see um, much better photography than people do with their cell phones held up to plexiglass cases, trying to get the best possible picture of you know the new Lobo maquette. So this will be a way to really you know take that home, and since we're all um, socially distancing for the holidays, it'll be a nice way to pass the time.
And if you'll indulge me just one more time, I do want to say that, and it's been so many years now, but one of the favorite books in this house is without a doubt your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle book.
Mhm.
And that book went under Ella's pillow for it had to been 9 to 12 months. I mean,
Oh,
she was sleeping, the book was under her pillow. She carried it around like it was a freaking stuffed animal,
uh,
and we bought a copy because we're a family, and we're all like, and we thought we would be able to see the book. I think we had to get another one because we just couldn't have access to the book. It was like off limits. And I really want to thank you for that contribution and being that part of our life, because I mean, she had books that she fell in love with, but never that hard and never that long. And and as a parent who has read, who can read, don't let my speaking patterns fool you. I can read, and and it's just so nice to see a child fall in love with a book, and so hard. And that is your distinction, sir. That was what you did at this house.
thanks so much. I love to hear that, and that was such a fun book. Um, I think that's probably the one I spent the most, literally the most time on, because it was about a year or two in the production process. So not a week went by that I was not interviewing somebody new for that, and it was such a fun thing as a kid who grew up on the Turtles. Um, when they hit TV in 1987. So it's so cool to hear that. My kid is not as excited about the Ninja Turtles as yours, but maybe someday that'll happen.
Well, it might be one of your other books, or it might be one of your colleagues' books. You never know. But I did want to take that moment to thank you.
I love to hear that. Thanks so much.
And once again, we've been talking to Andrew Farago. Yeah.
Margo.
Ruby.
Close, very close, very
Sorry.
close.
And you talked to us about EC Seeker, and we're gonna split this up. You're gonna be on this Tuesday. We'll do the interview, and then Wednesday the opening. Just so that we don't put like an hour and a half out there, and so we'll break it up into two pieces. So this is gonna be